In Chapter 5, Corporations We Trust, we investigate what monopoly really means for our country and the role of corporations and its effect in the market. One of the most interesting things that I found out about monopolies is that it's primarily an American sort of invention to be against monopolies. Uh, there are some benefits to busting monopolies, as we have seen. The example in the book is the transistors and the entire electronics industry. I mean, you're literally looking at the benefits of antitrust in action right now, looking at our screens. Uh, so then again, with the oil companies, that was another really big uh, change in the mindset and the telecoms, for those who remember AT&T and T and the baby bells. And it goes deep into the history of the 20th century, where in the turn of the century, in the early part, World War II and a little bit thereafter, we see that there's a cultural pushback against it. The grandparents and parents of President Roosevelt and even the members in the Supreme Court of the United States, they were quite literally pioneers, and they knew the value of individuals being able to make it on their own, and they had seen legislation um, cripple their ability to make it on their own. And when companies got too big, they saw their livelihoods be affected in a negative way. And this social norm or narrative that's in the family at the dinner table was alive for that generation. And we see their thoughts on it. The Supreme Court, any increase of market share above 30% is anti-competitive. Well, look at big data now and look at where our market is now. But we move toward those with a view of antitrust. And it's true that uh, there is a compelling argument against antitrust, and that we look at Stigler there. The mere fact that they exist means that they should be there. Well, one of the things that we have to look at in the economic view of the choices of men and women, mostly men in those decades because they were in the companies, is the predatory nature of humans, that we are predatory unto other humans. And the kind of monopoly that we're looking at is one of crush all competition and I'm the survivor. And there's arguments that that's not the best choice for mankind, but those who uh, adhere to that policy argue that there's no better way to weed out the weak. However, monopolies are good. We simulate monopolistic market conditions with patents, and those monopolistic market situations allow for small businesses to compete in the marketplace. So it's not that monopolies are necessarily bad. I think it's more about um, what the cost benefits are. And it seems to be that the ones that benefit in the short run are the consumers, and in the long run are the managers. But everyone else, especially the workers, really get the stiff end, and the environment really get the stiff end when it comes to monopolies. And we see the changes from the presidents of the days of yore, and also the presidents of just the turn of the century and this century, where Clinton was largely responsible for um, Sinclair monopoly, which is media. And then Bush came in. Actually, fun fact, Colin Powell's son had passed legislation when he was the head of the FCC uh, against 450,000 letters that were sent to the FCC's office opposing uh, the dissolution of regulation that stops from media monopolies. And let me give you an example. There was the Denver Post and I think the Rocky Mountain Tribune or something like that. It used to be that those two companies could not be owned by the same um, corporation. But after the Bush era and Colin Powell's son, they took that limitation away. So now we have one company in Denver, I remember, they have one company that owns multiple news stations and both of the major uh, newspapers. So the same editors pumping out the same stories, same agenda. That kind of monopoly um, is a threat to not free speech, but the dissemination of ideas that typically mean that democracy can take place. So we run a sticky line between um, the antitrust and anti-antitrust, and it seems sticky in I think ideological terms, but the numbers are in, and monopolies really are on the rise. And if we look at it, it's not necessarily that good of a thing. We have just massive dominance of corporate behemoths, and because of this agglomeration into big centralized power, we see that um, the socioeconomic power of the middle class is dwindling. It's all going up to the top. And we see it here hardware stores like Lowe's, airlines, meat processing, credit rating. Oh, how about a monopoly that decides on your future? That doesn't sound very good. Everywhere we look, in general, smartphones, the monopolies are on the rise. There are some trends, but mostly we see that those trends where the monopolies are falling is due to globalization. Tire manufacturing is cheaper. You can just build it somewhere else, for instance, and ship it over from across the seas, and then it ends up the cheaper price busts up the monopolies that were here in the U.S. So as the takeaway comes, it's it's about timing and it's about who's in charge as to how successful the combat against monopolistic um, uh, market holds and companies will be. And in one sense, monopolies are not that bad of a thing because there are benefits. But in the end, we just got to see who's helping the most. Is it better to have more people, more diversity in production and in the market? Um, we tend to say yes, I think, in this nation. Whether we say yes but act different, um, that seems to be the trend. But that's the hope, is that we can keep this middle class thing alive. And as long as monopolies get put into place, that cherished middle class of the Americas is possibly going to be a thing of the past. I hope that you found this useful and that you enjoy the rest of our lovely economics experience in this charming book club.